Before you send your brand new Arrma Outcast AS EXB V2 20 foot in the air, there are a few crucial checks you must do, or you might be replacing parts before you've even got through your first battery pack. Today, I'm going to show you what these crucial checks are, and also a cheeky little hack that might save you replacing your bulkheads. Let's dive in.
Oh, mate!
Hey RC fans, hope you're having a great day. Today we've got the Arrma Outcast AS EXB V2 on the bench, and today we're going to be running through some must-do upgrades, check over the vehicle before its first run. Now, my history isn't really that good at checking my vehicles over the first run, but the amount of money that is invested in this RC, I always think it's a good idea to do it. And to be fair, I should do it every single time regardless. So let's dive in. What we're going to be doing today, we are going to be checking the diffs, making sure they've got enough fluid. We're going to be doing the front diff, the rear diff, and the centre diff. We're also going to have a little look in the shock, see what the fluid levels are doing in that. We've also got to do some electronic tuning by ways of making sure our endpoints are set, and we're also going to be having a look at our programming card to make sure that we've got the latest firmware, and also we do some tweaks with the ESC. And that'll be the setup. I'll also be checking every single one of the screws, and then after we've done the setup, at the same time I'm going to be installing an M2C rear chassis brace. Why? Because this is a heavy old truck and I want to just protect the back of the chassis just in case it has an awkward landing where it comes down heavy on the rear. I don't want to be bending this chassis. I'm also going to be installing some stone guards at the front, so in effect to stop all the dirt and debris getting into your electronics, to help it stay a little bit cleaner for longer. And then there's also, while we're wrenching, we're going to be doing a screw hack where we change out the screws that go into the bulkheads to try and make sure our bulkheads last a little longer and the screws don't pull out of our bulkheads, which will save you a nice expensive repair on replacing your bulkheads. Anyway, enough of me waffling. Let's get wrenching. I'm absolutely besotted by this RC. I think it looks the dog's danglies. I've always been a fan of some of the Arrma stunt trucks, so I was looking at getting a Notorious until I was fortunate enough to be allowed to drive Chris with a C's one when we went up for a bash at Dusty 2.0 recently, and that kind of sealed the fate as such. Chris kept offering me different RCs and I just couldn't leave this one alone, so here it is in my workbench. Now, with the diffs, best thing about Arrma's is you've got a great big case in there and it's quite easy to access. For this, we do need to remove the bumper spring and the front bumper, and then you can get access to your front diffs. First thing we've got to do is take off this bumper spring. Finding out firsthand, everything's bigger. So I may need to invest in some larger hex drivers, because all these are 3 mils. Guess it's all relevant. The larger you go in your RC, the bigger the hardware needs to be. Start off in the front diff. That should come away with the... Turn this mighty thing over. So it's that. So you've got 3 mil. Oh no, they've changed it again. Oh yes. So this is a 2.5. Might I also suggest, if you've invested in a truck like this, invest in some decent tools. I'm using anything orange handle, is the MIP bit drivers, but I haven't got a comprehensive set. Definitely haven't got a comprehensive set for something this size. So I'm using good old-fashioned Allen keys. Should be, yeah, through there, I reckon. Let's find out what size they are. 2.5, that's lucky. I'm not going to show you all of this wrenching. I'm just going to do a little bit and then talk about any findings of what I've done. That is the bumper off. We'll put that to one side. Don't want to lose that. I've got a feeling I'll need that on this RC. So the fluids that I'm going to be using, I'm going to be using 1 million CST in the front. I'm going to be using 500,000 CST in the rear. And the Centre Diff is the 20 million. Purists, look at that. Arrma diff oil going in an Arrma diff. Get them out of the way. So diff casing then, in theory, it should only be a couple of these, 3 mils, 3 millimeters. Let's see what the diff, what's happening in the diff. And finally, this old beastie in the middle. That sounds like a 4 mil. Again, probably need to invest in some electric ones to speed this process up. But again, I quite like old school. Old school, do it by hand. But for the videos, definitely be easier. And then, is that it? There we go, give it a little pull. And that has exposed our front diff. Also, to enable us to get this diff out, if we remove the shocks, it allows our drive shafts to move. There we go, all supported now. I'm using a Traxxas stand. Again, it is a really good stand actually for your larger scale trucks. So anyone else that's got an Outcast, what are your go-to tips and setup things that you go? Size of that shock, oh, that's a beast. Yeah, what are your setup things that you do? Right, I know that Arrma shim their diffs. Very carefully I'll whip this out. Nice and careful. Can we get it out? No, the other shock's in the way. Let's remove this one as well. Oh, everything's so big and scary. Why are you not popping out? There we go. One side out, other side out. Size of that beastie. So again, it doesn't actually feel too bad. One thing I will note is there is a shim. So ensure that that shim goes back and it goes on the crown gear side as well. So make sure when you do it, that goes back in. Real chunky spiral cut gears as well. That's fantastic. So let's get it open and see what we got. Be really, really careful when you're opening your diffs up. you do not want to round these bolts off, or screws should I say, because if you do, you could quite easily be having a bad day. Oh, come on, watch out, don't, no. Oh, that's pants. So this diff gasket was slightly welded to the diff casing, and I've got a break in it. You can see there, look. So that's something to make note of. So what I potentially have then is I might have a leaky front diff. So what I usually do with if I ever break a gasket and it's kind of intact, I'll get a bit of diff fluid and kind of run over the top a little bit to try and seal it back in. Ultimately, when it's all clamped down, fingers crossed, that's not going to be an issue, but 100% is going to be something I'm keeping an eye on. Diffs, hopefully you can see, but your diffs have pretty much got all the, I'd say that's a full diff. Or would I? No, there's a gap there. There's a few little gaps in there. I'm just going to fill it up regardless. Again, 1 million is extremely, I say extremely, it's more of a gel than a liquid. And I'm just going to try and fill in the blanks with 1 million. Look at it. Yeah. Wipe it in. Go, turn the gears. Turn the gears, try and mesh it through. There you go, now I've turned the gears, it's all sunk to the bottom. So all I want to do is I want to fill this diff up just so the gears are covered. Just so there's no gaps in between the gears. It's nice and full. Again, I'm also going to wipe away any excess. Sorry about that, my camera decided to overheat. So if we look in the diffs now, we can see that all the gears are nicely covered with diff fluid. And now we can rebuild our diff. It's also had a little bit of time to settle so that any air bubbles can escape. Always remember, you got to line up the alignment holes. There we go. Let's marry this back together. Push it in. There you go. Whenever you push something together, you've got to have your tongue poking out slightly, just so it makes it look like it's harder work than it is. Now, what we got to do, we've got to put our screws back in. So how I put my screws back in my diffs, I ensure that I do them up loosely to start with. And then once they're kind of starting to clamp down, or they get well and truly started, then I will do them up in like a star pattern. So if you were to number your screws going clockwise or anti-clockwise, 1, 2, 3, 4, I would go 1, 3, 2, 4. That would be the order that I'll do them up. So basically you're doing the opposite side and then slowly go round and clamp them, just so then you've got a nice flat clamp over your diff casing. nip that one up, then we go across. So 1, 3, 2 and 4. Go round and just check they're all nipped up, and then check your diffs. It should be nice and smooth, no graunching, no kind of dead spots or tough spots. It just should feel smooth all the way around, which this one does. And then it's ready to go back in the RC. But before we do that, we got to remember, fit the shim. So the shim was on the crown gear side. And also one more thing that I like to do is, because the gearbox is full of grease and it's been spun around, I'm going to steal some of that grease and put it around some of the gears, just so we've got some nice mechanical lubrication so our gears don't get too hot. And then we can put it back in. So when we're putting it back in, make sure you don't crush that shim. Make sure the shim, it all goes in nice. Should just locate like that. And you could be a wally like me, because I'm concentrating on the shim. Make sure you put your drive shaft back in. No one wants a 3-wheel drive Outcast. And when you put it in, just check it all goes in and just push it back in, just like that. Be careful with your shim because it's extremely thin. Cool, shim's still okay. That's the main thing. Protect that shim. This is probably the fiddliest bit. That one in. That one in. Make sure that it's fully seated. That's better. And now our shim's seated nicely. Our diff's seated nicely. Now we can rebuild this puppy. Exactly opposite way. Put your gearbox casing on. Again, just be nice and careful with it. Don't want to upset that shim. It just slides on. And it should just click into place like so. Just a nice double check. There we go. I'm not going to show you, but let's just rebuild it in the opposite order. Front diffs all button up, all nicely done, no issues there. All I'm going to do now is exactly the same to the rear diff. I'm going to check that. I'm going to be putting 500,000 in there. Exactly the same principle. Only difference is you've got to take your rear wing mount off. So I'm not going to show you this. I'll see you in a sec. Now we're going to move on to checking the centre diff. To get all the centre diff out, our centre diff is in there. So we need to take all our bracing system off. I quite like what Arrma's done with this bracing system. It's generally held in by body clips and pins. So you can just pull out the body clip and remove a pin. Simple as that. No tools required. Which I like it when people simplify things. If you don't need a screw, we don't provide one. Now then, that clips out. Push this through. That's through. Next pin. So there, in theory, look, that's off already. Now to remove this top section, same again. Pull out your body clips. Easier said than done, Grunt. There you go. Push these pins through. Bang, bang. There's that brace out the way. There you are. They're out your way. Happy days. So put these to one side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these ones as well. And that one. When you're taking your brace system apart, it's always handy to remember which side's the long one and which side's the short one. Sometimes it will be quite obvious due to the distance between your tower and your rollover structure, but every now and then it isn't that obvious. There we go, that's that out. Now let's flip it over and let's undo some screws, get this motor mount off. So again, all this will be Loctited in. So if you feel it slipping, get a bit of heat in there to soften that Loctite up. There you go, look. Because we're going into alloy, we have got Loctite. And likewise, when you come to put it back together, make sure you put your Loctite back on it as well. There you go. That feels nice and loose now. Support it just so it doesn't fall off in your hand. And fingers crossed, when I flip it back over, it doesn't fall out. And two, that's nice and loose. In theory, motor wire's off, this brace is off. Let's do something. Maybe I have to take this one off to give it me a bit more room. So drop this pin out. I must admit, I am loving this centre brace system. It's rather handy. Go, one drive shaft. Go, there's one out. There's two out. And there we have. Got our motor out and our centre diff. Again, huge centre diff in there. And actually, to be fair, hear that rocking? That mesh is not quite nice. It's quite nice, that mesh. And then to get access to our diffs, there are 5 screws in this diff case in here. If you can't find one of them, that's because it's located behind one of your centre braces. So one of your braces sits in there, so you've got to take this brace out to actually get the screw location. Let's whip this off. And also another thing with that gasket we just saw on the bottom, make sure that that goes back in and it's nice and sealed, because then it will help keep all the dirt and grit out of your diffs. As you can imagine, you don't want any foreign objects in your diffs, in your gears, grinding and wearing things down. So all the videos that I have seen on these centre diffs on your Outcast, they all seem pretty full, but we are going to check just to show you all. And remember, just be careful with this gasket, because when you do separate or get access to your gearbox, you don't want to rip this gasket. There you go, little wiggle, take it off, keep it clean, pop it one side. I haven't quite undone one of the screws. Which one are you? There you be. So when we pull our diff out, there you go, make sure you remember which way round it goes, because that will be, you'll be having a bad day if you put all that back in. It isn't there. So again, there's no shims on this one. 20 million. That is a very, very, very tight diff. So another advantage with this style diff is you can actually access both sides, and also there are spacers, so you need to be aware of those spacers. Otherwise, you've got to order some spacers before you put your diffs back together. So make sure they go back in and you don't lose them. out. So I would also like to quickly highlight something to you all, that when you buy a new RC from factory, there are some inconsistencies sometimes. If we look at these 4 screws, 3 of them are absolutely coated in Loctite. One of them has just got a small little smear, and that was all done at factory level. Not saying it's a good thing, not saying it's a bad thing, but what I'm saying is when you're at factory, inconsistencies can happen. That's why it's always a good idea to check your trucks over or your RCs over before you run them, because it may not be as simple as an amount of Loctite. It could be something like your diff fluids, your shocks, you've got leaky this, you've got leaky that. So it's always a good idea just to give your RCs a once over before you run them. There we go. A little bit more brute force than I was looking for. There we go. Even this, that looks nice and packed, to be fair. So there we got, that's 20 million in that. And that looks well coated, to be honest, but I'll see if I can get any more in there. Only needs a little dab. The diff fluid I'm using is the Arrma 20 million, so part number just there, I'll whack it on the screen. Again, does it matter what diff oils you use? Not always, but I found actually the Arrma stuff was also the cheaper option. So what you'll find is your 20 million diff fluid. It's probably not even a fluid. It's more like a putty or a gel. Let's get into it. Yeah, that's the consistency of 20 million. It's like a bouncy ball. So to do it is break it up, put it in a bowl and stuff it in. That's all you do. And all I'm going to do with this is find a little mini gap and stuff it in. Just so that's all nicely packed with 20 million. So I've hardly used any, and it's really easy to use as well. Just roll it up in a ball and stuff it in between your gears. Happy days. So what I was saying is when you've got your diff, there's some 3 spacers around your spur gear. Make sure they're evenly spaced, in which case you put a plastic spacer in every 4th gap, and then that ensures that your spur gear is nice and central when it spins, because the last thing you want is it to be off center slightly. That will cause you some running issues, shall we say. So that's all filled up. While off camera, I did check the other side and pack the other side all out with 20 mil. So these are all good to go. And I can re-button this one up. Now, just need to put a bit of Loctite on here. Only needs a little dab. Okay, just a little dab. Put it in there. And wind it in. Another thing with Loctite as well, make sure you allow it to dry before running your RC. So this stuff will take 24 hours to fully cure. And now, got to check that this is all nice and smooth. So what I'll do is I'll get a couple of old, less expensive hex drivers and just check it smooth. And that feels really, really nice. Now, we can get it, remembering which way round it went. So the side with the spacers goes into the diff housing. Make sure it's fully engaged, fully flat. And remember, put your gasket back on. Now what we need to do is whack this back in the Outcast. Having a quick think about it, while the motor's out, I'm going to double check that there is Loctite on the grub screw for the pinion, because I've heard reports that sometimes they work themselves loose, and as the motor's out, what a perfect opportunity to check if there's any Loctite, I'll put my teeth in a minute, on the pinion gear. And the answer is a teeny tiny amount, ever so slight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this off, and I'm going to reapply some Loctite. At least then I know exactly how much Loctite is on this little grub screw. And then if it falls off, that's on me. Okay, so a little bit of isopropyl alcohol just to get rid of the old Loctite. Reapply. And that's way too much. That's way too much Loctite. Okay, only needs a dab. So in theory, that grub screw is in there nice. Now let's whack it back in the RC. So we got our motor back in, all nicely plumbed up. Off camera, I have taken the rear assembly away, which is sat nicely just out of camera shot. Now we're going to have a go at installing this beautiful bit of machining from M2C Racing. Part number 3328, rear skid for the Outcast 8S. So what do you get in the pack? Well, first of all, you get the brace, which never ever disappoints. It's a gorgeous piece of machinery. You get a new hinge pin retainer, because when you install this, the rear bumper has to go bye-bye. Get a little plastic gasket. It just sits in there. And then one of the best things about M2C is the fact they supply all the hardware that you need as well. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to check that the L's line up, because that would really suck if they didn't. And guess what? Of course they do. Of course they line up. So for the majority of this, we're going to be using all the existing holes, but we do need to drill one. We're going to drill one through the centre, through our lovely chassis, and it's going to make me sad, but short-term pain, long-term gain. This will protect the chassis nicely. Right, so had to put the rear assembly back on, because had to put these two screws in before the brace goes over the top. As you can see, the brace does cover, so you won't be able to gain access to those anymore. Another two screws that I have to remove are those two in the middle, which I'll do now. And now, in theory, this should fit. So we'll have this piece that way. That just acts as a spacer, because there is a recess on the EXB version. And then these holes should nicely line up. Now, while I'm doing all of this, there is a little cheeky update that you can do on the screws to protect your bulkheads. So what comes from factory is you get these M5. Let's see how long they are actually. Where did I put that? So from factory, you get these M5s, and they are 16mm in length. Okay, what happens is after a bit of abuse, they can pull through your bulkhead and pull the thread and strip the thread of your bulkhead. So what we're going to do, if we weren't putting a brace on, we'll be putting an M18 in there, which is a little bit longer. And all that does is it just goes a little bit further into your bulkhead and just gives these threads a little bit more purchase. So I'll be putting these M5 18s on the front, but because I've got this brace, it makes it a little bit thicker. I'm going to be putting the supplied 20mm ones in there, just because we've got a little bit of added thickness. Hope that all makes sense. Clear as mud. We're going to be putting the M20s in the outside, and then we've got these M25s, or the M5 25s, that are going to be going in the front here and here, which again, a little bit more purchase into the bulkhead, and that will help protect your bulkhead. I don't want to take the credit for this little hack. I learnt it from my friend Chris, who learnt it from someone else, who might have learnt it from something else, or someone else, or someone else. This is what's nice about the hobby. We're sharing the information to get the best possible experience out of our RCs. So thank you, Chris, for sharing that information. Very, very appreciated. Right, let's get these screws in. So the long ones go in the closest to the centre diff. And then the shorter upgraded screws go closest to the front or the rear of the RCs. And we've got two slightly longer ones that are supplied with the brace that go in the middle, here and here. Make sure they should still go in the hole nice, because we're using an existing thread. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tighten it all down. That's all put on. There is one more that I'm going to do, and that involves drilling a hole through the chassis. Oh, don't know if you can hear that, but the rains are coming down. Hinge pin retainers are in. Now you just got to drill that hole. And we're through. So there we have it. M2C brace is on. Drilled a hole through the chassis. There is a nut and bolt. It is a little bit fiddly, but if you get some long nose pliers on there, you can get to your nylock the other side. So that is all nicely buttoned up. We've done our little screw fix. Other companies are available, where you put 25mm M5s closest to your centre differential, and then we're going to be putting 18 by M5s furthest away. So we're going to be replacing the screws here for 25s and the screws there with M18s. Again, just to secure up the bulkhead. Let's whack them in. There we go. So that's all our screws replaced with slightly longer ones and high tensile strength ones. So what I'm going to do now, as it's upside down, is just go around and check all the other screws. And there we have it. All the screws have just been checked. Everything's tight as a drum. Skid brace off, and skid brace on. Longer screws put in, new hinge pins, done the diffs. Let's turn this puppy over again and then just finish it off. So what we're going to do now, put all the braces back on, plug the motor back in, and then we'll have a check of these shocks. We're all back together now. So we have done our front diff, put 1 million in the front, centre diff, 20 million in the centre diff, rear diff, 500,000 or half a mil in the rear diff. We have also put our M2C skid brace on the back. We have Loctited our pinion onto our motor, and now we've also put some stone guards on the front of our chassis, which are just one one screw and they just slide out on the outside. So now I'm just going to check, see how much fluid we got on our shocks. So what we got. So yeah, more or less to the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to top it off with 700, do the same to all four, and put it back in the truck. Shocks have all been checked. I've topped up all four. Didn't have any 700, which is the stock fluid for these shocks. So what I've done is I've gone around and I've emptied a little bit of the 700 out and topped up the rear shocks, and then I've filled the rest of it up with 1000, just to try and give it a little bit more stiffer front end, just so when the weight does come down, it can absorb some of that impact. Right or wrong, we're going to find out on the first run. I've seen a few cases where the pivot ball retainers keep working their way loose. So I thought before the first run, I'm going to take the covers out and I'm just going to wrap a little bit of PTFE around the thread just to stop them from backing out. We're going to give it a go. We're doing this for science. Let's get to it. So I'm going to take the pivot ball covers out and then wrap a bit of PTFE around them. Let's see what's going on. Let's back it out. Use the tool that Arrma provided in the box. Okay, nothing else in there. So all I'm going to do, take a little bit of PTFE and lightly wrap it around the threads. I don't want to go too nutty with it because it is composite into composite, and the last thing I want to do is strip those threads on that hub, because then you're into an expensive replacement. So all I'm going to do is go around once and that'll do. Make sure I take it out. Don't want anything in the recess where the pivot balls go, and then very gently, hand tight, not putting any force on the threads. I'm just going to do it up, and it's going to find its own thread, because I can actually feel already that they're quite easy to get in even with that PTFE. So I may actually put a tiny bit more on. So what I've now found out whilst off camera is that running one load of PTFE around it isn't enough. So I'm going around it twice to make sure that those threads are nicely covered. And when they go back in, fingers crossed, they cut their original thread, or rather they don't cut a new thread, should I say, and they should just effortlessly go in like so. So even that's quite easy to go in with two around it, with two layers of it. Now it's starting to bind a little bit, which is nice. So now I'm going to tighten them up until it goes fully bound, which you don't want, and you want to just back it off until there's no binding whatsoever and the hub is free, like so. So now I'm going to put steering blocks back on. I'm going to do the same to the other side, and then I'll see you on the bench. So then we have now completed all of our mechanical wrenching. I've even adjusted the toe, because I've noticed out the box there's a little bit of toe out on the front, so I've now got those back in line just by adjusting the turnbuckles. PTFE is around the pivot ball retainers, so let's see how well they last. Other than that, I just need to do some adjustments on the electronic side, plug in my programmer, set my endpoints, and then this RC is ready for its first rip. Now we're going to upgrade our electronics, make sure we've got all the latest versions for our ESC and for our program box. So we're using the Spektrum Smart ESC Programmer V2. Easiest way to use this, you can use it as a standalone where you just plug into your ESC as per usual. The other way is you can connect via your laptop. When you connect via your laptop, you need to make sure that you download the Spektrum firmware app. Follow all the instructions from there. And then what we're going to do is we have options that we can choose from. See in our LCD program box, which is our smart programmer. And we're going to have a look to see if we've got any upgrades or updates to the firmware. So if you look here, we've got the latest firmware because there's no drop down and that button's grayed out. So that's good news. So now we're going to plumb in to our ESC. So now we're connecting straight to the Outcast. So this is where you can change your parameters just like you would as if you were plugging in with any other program card. We're going to have a look down here, firmware update, and we've got a firmware version here. So that's what our Outcast is currently running, and our latest one we've got B7.8. So on the drop down menu we're going to check, nope, okay, that is the most up to date. So we're going to click upgrade and then we're going to let it do its thing.
A few moments later.
There we go, upgrade, operate, finished successfully. And there we go, it's just restarted the ESC. And there we have it. We've got a freshly updated ESC. Now we're reconnecting, and in theory if we go back to firmware update, there you go, most up-to-date version. There we go. So while we're here, what are we going to do? Forward reverse running mode, forward reverse with brake, yes. Low voltage cutoff, I might drop that down to, what's the lowest it goes? 3.2, or I might play safe at 3.4. Punch, I'm going to keep that factory. Maximum brake force 50%. Yeah, why not? That's not a bad idea. You don't want it, or maybe even just nudge it down a little bit. I've heard they're quite sharp. Reverse 25%. Yeah, neutral range, narrow. What have we got on advanced? Beck, definitely. That's something I want to up. 8.4. This servo and ESC supports 8.4 volts for our BEC. And then before we go, make sure we send settings to ESC, apply, settings sent, OK. And there we go. And now we can disconnect and unplug it all. Now then. There we have it, all done. Now, let's set all our endpoints. What we're going to do now is we're going to set the endpoints for our steering. Why do we want to set our endpoints? Because we don't want our servo trying to turn the wheels further than they'll mechanically go. So first step, and probably one of the most important ones, let's turn the RC on. Beep, 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 doo-doo. Now we've got our RC on. To go into calibration mode, steering wheel full right, full brake, power on. And then that'll tell you that you've gone into calibration mode with it flashing. And then let's turn our steering up to 100%. And then what we want to do is with our steering turned, we want to move our steering trim until the wheels start to move. Look, as you look, I'm controlling the steering. And what we want to do is we want to have it backed off, so as soon as the wheels stop moving. You got any more in it? And that's that way. And we turn the other way. And then do the same again. And let go. And then we can turn it off. And that set our endpoints. And that will help save our servo. Happy days. Good news, she's ready to run. Right then guys, so just finished wrenching on the Outcast to get it all ready for its first run. So let's quickly run through what we did. We checked the diffs, topped up the fluid in the diffs, we checked every single screw, we went through our suspension, made sure all the fluid levels were right in that. We added an M2C rear skid brace. We've also added slightly longer screws into the bulkhead, just so the screws don't pull out the bulkhead on a heavy landing. We've also PTFE'd around the pivot ball retainer nuts as such, set our endpoints, and we've updated our ESC, and we've changed it all up, and now she's ready to rip. Fingers crossed, soon, when the weather allows, we're going for an 8S rip.